10th Design for Drupal. I'm Kelly Albrecht with Last Call Media. This is Colin Panetta, Jamie Johnson. Done this talk a few different times. Did it in Nashville as a kind of a disruptive DevOps talk. So there's a slight amount of that in here, but really all I want to do is explain some of the why you might want to get close to your customer, how you might want to think about it, and then Colin and then Jamie are going to talk about what they've done to implement that strategy on a recent project that we're having a lot of fun on. All right, so I want you to think about the work you do, the things you produce, and who you produce it for, and think about your customers and think about your day-to-day and how close are you right now to your customer. Do you communicate with your customer? Is that something that another person does in between you and them? Do you know if they like the work? Do they know if they're changing their mind, or if what you want to develop is the right thing or not? How close are you? How many people in the room are developers? Okay, so it looks like half. What about kind of in charge of like project management or product management? A fewer number of people. What about like who does like customer service? Okay, it's kind of the same people that are on the project management team. Okay, so it's pretty easy if you're a small team to be close to your customer. It's almost like the customers just walk in the door and say, "Hey, I need help. Can you do this for me?" But as your projects and products get bigger and bigger and more people get involved, you start to get further away from your customer. So I want you to think about why that might be a problem and think about why you might want to be close to your customer, have a closer relationship with your customer. So I think for many of us, this can kind of represent our day-to-day. We develop things and either somebody puts them into operation for us, or maybe we just put it on a different hat and deploy our work into operation. And our tasks come in through our task tracking system, and we work on them and we do them. We have to do them by a certain date, and then we just ship it off to our customers, or that we may not ever talk to or communicate with. But it's actually kind of a much longer, a lot more steps if you have a larger product. So you can imagine, think of, maybe if you're on a small team doing smaller projects or products, think about what that might happen as it gets larger. There may be somebody responsible for the product, and they're working. You might have a community around your product, and at some point there are some customers that many people on the team never really interact with. And so really the work pushes down across the stream, the customers get it eventually, and then maybe feedback gets back up to the team. And worst case scenario, it's like a game of telephone. So I think if you think about this, if we want to know that we're delivering the right thing, the customer is the one who's deciding if it's the right thing or not. So if we're the ones developing that thing, we want to know as quickly as possible and as often as possible if it is the right thing. We don't want to waste time guessing or doing too much work that's going in the wrong direction. So there's a lot of thinking about how can we. So basically, this is just the longest version of a feedback loop that I could put onto a slide. So you've got all these steps before we get the feedback on the work we're doing. And so there's a lot of work going into thinking about how can we shorten this feedback loop so we spend less time getting it wrong and more time getting it right. So I haven't mentioned DevOps yet, but this is really kind of the things that happen in a DevOps mindset. This yellow area of this circle is really kind of the product in production. and you plan. You can see down here on the bottom left, there's planning new features or fixing features that we've gotten from feedback, building stuff, automating testing and integration into deployment. We're really good at building and delivering things. We can build and deliver a lot of things very quickly, but I think a place where a lot of work is being done is getting closer to the customer in the sense that letting them know what we've built and what we've fixed, and letting them know how to use what we've built for them, and asking them directly in our product, how is it going? How do you, I'm sure everybody's been experiencing this in a lot of products they use. You probably ignore it all the time. Like, yes, this feedback was helpful, or yes, this page was helpful, but I'm just going to close this window. But sometimes you might, and maybe after this talk, you might give feedback more often. I know I do. But really, it's about building a relationship with your customer because at a larger scale, it's way too easy to get disconnected, and it's very easy to spend too much time building the wrong thing, and be getting bad feedback. You also want to work in a way so that you're delivering to your customer goods and help regarding those goods in a way that they know how to use them and give you good feedback. So specifically, this talk is about Drupal as basically the product in that relationship between those developing the product and those operating the product. So how do we think about, in what ways can we make Drupal better for our customers to give them a better experience and get better feedback from them, and let them and build that relationship. I think primarily this talk is going to be about that building of that relationship, letting the customer know that we listen to them and we're delivering something that they want to use. And the first person who's going to talk about that specifically is Colin.
Hey everybody, I am Colin Panetta. I'm the Director of UX UI at Last Call Media. So we're going to talk about a specific project that we did when we started working on the admin site for Mass.gov. So that's the site that authors go into to create content and edit content. So the feedback that we used for this project was that users were requesting the ability to move the authoring of content into the hands of the actual subject matter experts instead of keeping it in the hands of web experts or technical folks, as the old system more or less dictated. So ease of use became very important to fulfilling that objective. UX UI and the default Drupal admin theme, which they were using, has room for improvement. It can have unclear page hierarchy, which I would describe as being having no strong distinctions between what's more important or less important in places, and it can be unclear where specific areas begin or end, and it is not appealing. It has a drab color scheme that isn't nice to look at or interact with, and the generic appearance doesn't create a relationship with the user. So we decided, let's retheme the admin site. What could go wrong with that? So I'm going to talk about the design process of that for a few minutes. So retheming the admin site allows us to create a more engaging experience for our users and make those adjustments, focus on those areas where usability could be improved and make those improvements. Doing this with a pattern library allows us to apply these improvements at a large scale without the prohibitively high effort of creating designs for every single page. We want users to know they're in a space that's related to but distinct from the main content site. So we're using the same fonts and colors but flipping their usage. On the main site, a blue color is used for decoration and green for action, and here vice versa. And the display font uses thin weights instead of bold, but it's the same font. We're taking the fact that this is a dashboard site into account and making special considerations for that. As with many dashboard sites, the mostly experienced users of this site are more likely to know where they're going and need less hand-holding. To accommodate this, we're using smaller fonts and tighter spacing than on the main content site. In order to make page hierarchy clearer, we're making relationship-based vertical spacing rules. Elements that are closer together always appear more closely related, and elements that are further apart less related. So we define rules that reflect that, also keeping in mind that we want things to be a little more tightly spaced on the site overall. So unrelated elements are 48 pixels apart, somewhat related 36, closely related 24, and if things are part of the same element, they're close together, 12 pixels apart. Using the shared design vocabulary, we can take these ideas and apply them site-wide, even to pages that aren't designed. To start, development applied the broad strokes to the theme, while design focused on some of the areas that required more attention for usability. One of the major areas we wanted to focus on to start were form elements, which are used to create or edit content. As you can see here, this is especially tricky on Mass.gov, where content is pretty complex and the forms are being assembled from a number of differently styled modules. This creates a few problems, mainly that it's unclear where specific form elements begin or end, and it's difficult to tell which form elements are nested inside of which other ones. So we came up with a unified styling for all form elements, which you can see here. Besides the site-wide restyling, there are two main strategies in place. Horizontal lines showing the end of one form element and the beginning of the next, and vertical lines showing the beginning and end of nested reorderable elements, which you can see down on the bottom there. And I took these designs to development, and Jamie's here to tell you what that entailed.
Hey, I'm Jamie. I'm a developer at Last Call Media. This is my first ever Drupal presentation.
He's going to do a live demo.
Live demo. First try. I know, right?
Let's get all the mistakes out of the way.
Everything's crossed.
So I want to begin with to say, normally when the developer steps in, it's in a position like this where we say something like, okay, we've got some cool designs and aspirational ideas. Now we need to implement them. Already off script, and going to say that is not actually completely true on this project. What was actually true on this project is that we had a couple of pages of a design from a designer that was on his way out of the project. And then Colin was tasked with the assignment of reverse engineering it while I was simultaneously being pressured to start implementing the designs before they were done. And the result was this sort of confluence where I would finish what he had done, and then I would have to do more work because I wasn't done with the workday yet. So I just started making some design guesses and choices, and what resulted was a sort of collaboration. And actually, this is a really good representation of that collaboration. I think what kicked off the idea, the inspiration for this was like, we need something like subproofs. Remember doing symbolic logic or geometry in college? You have the lines that track your subproofs so that you know how far.
You're going to show of hands.
You know, your dad's like, anybody take math?
Not that.
So you can find your inspiration from multiple places.
So the challenge wasn't just we've got some cool designs and aspirational ideas and now we need to implement them. It was more like we've got part of some really cool design ideas and some aspirations and some ideas about what people want in the form of the feedback that Colin was talking about. Let's figure out how to make this into an admin site. And like Colin said, how hard could that be? Well, functionality to accommodate the UX of author and editorial experiences is not something that's gotten a lot of emphasis or attention in the Drupal core or contrib community at all so far. We've got new core functionality like the tour module, which Sorry guys, I'm not going to talk about it today. We could, but is everybody familiar with it? It's really fun. Play with it if you haven't yet. The tour module. Now that I'm done talking about things that we're not going to be talking about today, let's talk a little bit about the dearth in the Drupal community. In the Drupal code community in terms of what's available as resources. Admin themes. Anybody try to ever find one of these? Did you find one besides Add Minimal that did anything for you?
Yeah.
I've got high hopes for Material Admin, but it's not ready for prime time yet. Thunder. So what I did is I Googled around, and then I searched D.O, and I found a lot more for D7, but for D8, these were the main contenders of what I found. Thunder is for a specific distribution of Drupal for publishing, which is great if that's what you're doing, but it's not great for a community-wide resource. So I knew that we needed to do something like what Add Minimal was doing, but not that, because we needed it to look like how we needed it to look for the design implementation. In terms of modules, again, I found admin toolbar in terms of things that are geared specifically toward improving the author experience or the content editing experience. So there's not a ton of contrib out there, but what they do have is somewhat helpful. Like the toolbar is great, and I'm really glad it exists. So there is an awareness of this issue in the community, and it's growing, and I think that's a really great thing. But I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to make a plea to the community here. I'm going to continue.
That's my session tomorrow.
Come see this gentleman's session, and you can see a plea to the community to build and create and maintain the types of resources that I'm pointing out are missing.
It's Benji Fisher.
And maybe one quick qualification there. I don't think that this is necessarily a fault of Drupal's. I think this idea of commodifying and turning the admin part of the scene into the product itself is kind of been a thing that might have been happening, but it wasn't like conceptualized as such. And so I think the evolution of that process is going to be moving a little more quickly. So here's some things that we did for our site to try and improve the experience of the author and content editors. Given the dearth of subtheme or contrib themes that were available, what I did do is I investigated what Add Minimal was doing, because it had already occurred to me there are so many things in an admin, on the admin side of the site, so many things you can't possibly take into account when you start something like this. So how can I make sure not to like completely break everything? And so I thought, we'll do a subtheme of 7, and I felt very validated by that, given that Add Minimal, even though it's a contrib theme, is actually a contrib subtheme of 7. So it's hooking into 7 too and getting all the benefits of that. We developed a new and improved version of the admin toolbar, specifically with the intention of making navigation more efficient for content editors and creators. And we rebuilt a custom add content page specifically with AX in mind. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about each one of these for the remainder of my part of this. So like I said, following Add Minimal's lead, we made a subtheme of 7. Why a subtheme of 7? I could just appeal to authority and say because Add Minimal did it, so it must be right. If it got entered, if it's allowed in and you can download it on D.O, then they must be doing something right. But my main reason was this is going to be really hard, and I want to start with something that I can work with. And 7 doesn't look like anything what we wanted it to, but 7 gets security updates and is maintained. And any of you who write custom code knows that yours isn't. So what are the main challenges in building an administration theme for Drupal? Unless you maintain it yourself. I should say that quick. Maybe you do go back and update your code when you see a cross-script bug for something that's similar to your functionality.
No, it's
I don't know.
usually too late.
So what are the main challenges in building an admin theme for Drupal? We go right to the person who maintains the 7 theme, who says the biggest problem right now is the number of modules that require different user interfaces. Oh my God, is that ever true? Some modules make minor tweaks to the UI to meet their needs, some creating their own from scratch. It's very hard for an admin theme to support all of these use cases without something breaking, let alone making the UX feel cohesive. And I feel like in some of those before images that Colin showed you, you really get a flavor for how sort of disjointed it is and how unintuitive the pieces and parts can end up fitting together and actually violate your customer with whom you're trying to foster a relationship with. So, pros of using 7 as a sub-theme, it's best practice. It says so right in the 7.info.yaml file. There's a lot of good information in those info.yaml files. If you don't actually, if you want to know a lot about Drupal and you hate the documentation, actually open up the Drupal site and read it. It's amazing what you will learn. By doing this helps to ensure that our theme isn't going to unexpectedly break module UIs for modules that we haven't anticipated even needing yet. And it makes sure that we're not breaking anything that we've already got there. And like I pointed out just a minute ago, it keeps the Drupal community involved. So security bugs, security updates, it'll keep everything in line with whatever is in the most current version of core. Theoretically. Let's talk about some cons. One con was that using a subtheme of 7, we had this beautiful pattern library that we used for the design part that would have been great to do something like with Mannequin or Pattern Labs where we could implement a pattern library for the admin side. It turns out we're not there yet. I'm not there anyway. To build out something as consistent and internally coherent as 7 from scratch and implementing a pattern library seemed incredibly overly ambitious given timelines that are allotted to you by things like state governments. Despite our best efforts, even using a subtheme of 7, we ran into some whack-a-mole, which by we I mean me. So I got my base styling done and everything is looking good and I'm cruising along and then I pop open the views UI and it looks like somebody actually threw a stick of dynamite into the views UI and just shut the hatch and then left it for me to find. And I found all sorts of little surprises like that in the nooks and crannies of the site that I wasn't expecting to see. So regressions are real. Another con then is that this technique was never intended to be used for a retheme of this size. I think at one point in my frustration, I described it as the parasite having become larger than the host in order to accommodate all the customizations that we wanted. And then because it was a collaborative process, we start getting all of this great feedback, and then we want to incorporate that. That ended up being a big project. The final con is that the subtheme can't actually do the entire job by itself. So on the project that we're working on, we have something that's sort of like workbench tabs. And then, of course, you have your admin toolbar for when you're logged into the site. So even the user-facing pages have some admin-y type stuff on it. Well, it turns out that I figured out very quickly that if it's these front user pages, the front-end user-facing pages, they're actually inheriting their styles from the main theme, and that will mess up your stuff. So 7 couldn't do it alone. I needed to create some modules in order to make sure that the styles would override anything that the front end theme was using. So those are just a couple of things that kind of sucked about it, but the good news is that it worked. And a couple of the things that we made with this that I want to show you are the admin toolbar and the content page, just because I like both and I think that it really offers a good example of how we took the feedback to heart and used it to try and continue to foster and grow this relationship with our clients, who are, in this case, the authors and content editors. Now, authors and needed that.
We told you to leave it.
Oh.
Totally on purpose.
How many people are completely annoyed when a book has a page that says this page is intentionally left blank? Because it's not, if it says that. It's not blank anymore.
We told him nobody was going to laugh at his joke. We were like, leave the slide in there. You need to see. They were not going to laugh at this joke.
So here's the add content page that we came up with. Just to jog your memory, this is what the old add content page looks like.
Okay.
Yep, get that in your memory, really get it going.
Never going away.
Now I'm on a new tab, memory. Remember this guy?
Yeah.
Remember how you have to click everything now and click through it, or just memorize URLs? Here's a contrib module that helped a little bit with that.
Yeah.
So these are the raw materials we have to work with. And this is what we end up with. Nope, this one.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It's nice.
Because I can't do both at once, I have my notes for this on my phone. So let's look first at the toolbar. To build it, we started with the admin toolbar module, and then I created a separate custom toolbar module specific to the admin theme to put our customizations in. And just wanted to point out some highlights to it. Since this is a product, we wanted to make sure to put some product branding in there. This button, when it's complete doing what it needs to do, is going to take the author back to their login page, and then we're going to have a separate button that takes you back to the main site. The author homepage, the new welcome page, is under construction right now, so I'm not going to demo anything there. This actually shouldn't be here. I'm going to cheat. Don't hate. Okay, that's what it looks like if you're an author. We've got so we hooked into the tab bar and created a custom tab just for authors. This is one of the two tabs that they actually have access to. In there, we have a suite of links that takes them to design or pages that are specific to their needs only. We moved this over here to get them to kind of keep it out of the way. And of course, this is still native Drupal. But one thing that was missing in the process that I noticed was that there was no direct way for authors to get immediately to the two most important pages that they needed, which is to add content and to create new documents. So in order to do that and to keep the ability to keep a slim line top bar experience, we added the buttons right to the tab menu that will take them to their two most important pages. Add content brings you here. Now, oops. Yep, good. So moving on to the add content page. This is fine, right? If you have 10 content types, it's still fine. Mass.gov right now has 35 or so content types for an author to scroll down through, and we didn't think that that was a way to foster a good relationship with our clients. I mean, I just really love that page. So the first thing we did was create some categories for the content types to fall into. Each one of these categories is sort of jump linked down to here, and then you can see all of the content types that way based on category. Or Oh, it's backwards.
Is that a type? Oh, it's a drop down.
We can do this sort of, this search bar is completely custom, and it looks through both the content type names and the description text. So maybe you're like, I can't think of the name of that content type that my department or bureau makes every day. So maybe I remember that it does this one thing where it talks about events, and then I can still find the organization page, which is the page that I needed to make. The other modification that we did was we sort of made these content type teasers, I want to call them. That gives the content authors and editors a sort of, I don't want to say real life, but an informationally accurate thumbnail, which this guy built.
I love this. Those are amazing.
Each one is like a little picture of what it really is. In addition to that, what's that?
You don't have to read the words. It's perfect. You just like
Yeah.
goes right to what you want.
And if you want to scroll, you can, as long as you don't have any
It's very al fresco.
first terms. This is quick. So along with that, we also get some cleaner and more strategically positioned description text. We've got a link to a thing called the document site, which will give you even more information about that content type, how it's used, and tips and pointers for how to create one for yourself. We get a sort of bulleted list of the different things that it's good for. Let's sort of TLDR version of what you would get if you clicked on the link. And I don't have any examples of it right now because we haven't used it, but it's also set up to include a link to a live example of the node itself, which is going to, I think, ideally be a page in Pattern Lab. So those are the things that I wanted to show you.
If you go to add a service details, isn't Tor enabled on
If I go to add a service details, you know what? I went a little faster than I thought I would. You guys want to see some tour?
Yes.
I know you do. So on a couple of content types, we have the tour module experience. Do you want to talk about it? You have way more experience.
Sure,
This guy actually implemented the tour module functionality for this project. Thank you.
So, so the other times that I've given this talk, Tor has been a critical piece, and we cut it because we didn't want to run out of time. But the way that Tor fits into the strategy is part of that, letting your customer know what's new, and with Tor specifically where it is on the page, and letting them know how they might use it depending on where it is on the page. And you can also link to more help text. So it's part of that. It's part of that delivery cycle. At the here's what we're delivering. Here's where it is. Here's how to use it better. And you can even ask some feedback. And so I'm sure one of the cool things about Tor is that you can auto start them if they exist on a page. So Jamie started this tour by pressing this tour button over here in Drupal. Anytime there's a tour on a route in Drupal 8 configured for a Drupal 8 route, it will show this link up here. You can probably try it on a Drupal 8 site that you have right now by going to edit a views configuration. It'll be up there on the right. That one comes with Drupal 8. But other than pushing that button, you can also auto start them with $tour in the URL, and so that time it just auto started. So one of the reasons why that is cool is because if I go back to this add content page, this can continue to be improved by having you could have a link to take the tour, and so that's part of of like an intention and a plan that's not implemented yet. But right, so like you can imagine this link right here goes to node add service details, but all we need to do is put if it knows there's a tour at this route, we can have a link show up somewhere in here that goes to node add service details $tour. And so, for example, if I just imitate that, copy this link, and do $tour, right? You can have a link that says take the tour to this content type, and it goes right to it. Starts a tour. Okay, and so this could be something like we've added new things to this page. Learn more about it in detail here, or take this tour. Next. The way it knows where to go next, these are all configured in YAML files, and they target CSS classes and IDs, and so this is all configured in a YAML file, which is really cool from a DevOps perspective because you can build the creation and updating of your tooltips into your product development workflow. So if you know, so let's say that you're a product owner and we want to add a field to the service details page, and we know that our customers are going to need to know where on the page this field is, we can make it part of our acceptance criteria that, hey, add to the tour for this page this help text at this location on the page. And as completing that ticket, development can also update the code in the YAML file for when they're adding this field, they can update the code in the YAML file for the tour on the page that the field's going to go, and then when it all deploys at the same time in that code deployment, and it will show up where you want it to show up. So this is just talking about the title and short description. There are other sections. Last Call's done some custom work that's not implemented here yet and not released yet that will open these sections up. Right now, you can't, the Tor module out of the box doesn't know how to get into a tabbed section, so we're really just pointing it out here. And then, so really, another thing you'll notice too is it's a small window, so you don't want to give too much information, and you really want it to focus on where on the page something is, right? So here's like something on the right side, and here's a little explanation about it. And more features. With the Tor tips can have HTML in them. I think the technical term is paragraph HTML, maybe. I don't know. Whatever you can put in like a paragraph body or in a body inside of the body. There are some restrictions to, like you can't embed video here without a custom module. And then, here's my favorite part. Was this tour helpful? Take a 1 minute survey to tell us what you think. Not everybody's going to do that, but it's important to get feedback because that's how we continuously improve.
If you can, if you close that, you can see something that I built a couple months ago was this block down here that we're sort of continuously, even on the edit forms, even on the node add and edit forms, we're asking the authors for feedback so that we can continue to iterate on this and fine tune and improve that relationship.
Were those on there?
Yeah, my slides.
How are you storing the extra stuff about the content tags?
Oh, third-party settings.
Or is it a module?
It's I don't know how to describe it.
Drupal stuffs its third-party settings.
It's where Drupal stuffs its own third-party settings. We just sort of like hijacked it and like allowed it to store config for our content type teasers.
Okay.
But it's just it's a place where you can store config that's not for nodes. It's a place where Drupal stores its config for third-party settings, and you can utilize that in order to do things like customize content type displays and field them.
There's
So those are actually fields, or you just...
Yes, they're custom
Could you
made
show us
fields.
the add content type form?
I'm logged in, yeah.
The add content type form is not pretty.
Well, so like
That's okay.
if if we wanted to edit this text right here, I think that's what they're asking about.
Yeah. And like the picture...
So this binder type is good for is in PHP. It's hard coded, but we set it up in such a way that it was configurable. So on the will you actually go to the add content?
Yeah,
to add a content.
Oh, like add content type?
Yeah. Or no, back up once, and go. Just do
Like pick one?
pick one.
Yeah. I think we want to see.
So then you can see where
Edit
we
it?
put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And scroll down.
So here's where those bullet points are coming from.
Yep.
Right.
There you go.
So actually, if I'll just open this in another tab. So you got these bullet points.
So you hook into the add content type. Create.
Here's where it's configured for a live example, like you were saying.
Yep.
So this is
Add new categories on the fly? Or?
Yes. So for the first time ever, I got to use this handy dandy trick in PHP 7 where you can assign an array value to a constant, and that is how we are generating our list of terms. We tried using taxonomy, but things got squirrely. Drupal's just not set up like that yet to apply things like taxonomy, vocabularies to content types.
So currently the thumbnail is getting in there custom.
Yes.
Yeah. So the version of this talk that I gave in Nashville, it's recorded. You can check it out.
That's where the thumbnail.
Oh, that's where the thumbnail is. Yeah. Oh, I see.
Well, I'm curious about your last statement, though. You said taxonomy is not ready to go into a content type. What about term ref? You just add, what is it?
I mean, to classify a group of content types under a taxonomy term proved to be cumbersome and unwieldy. You can get it to do it, but it doesn't. You can't always predict the results.
So I was just plugging my Nashville talk real quick. It has a different idea about how to generate the interface, the add content interface that's tied into help content. I think it might be worth a watch. It basically is this idea that I have about adding a content kind of abstraction layer over top that can serve as help content, but also display all this information. So I won't go into it right now, but
Are you using paragraphs on the site?
Oh God, are we ever? I purposely cut all of this out of the talk because I would go on a diatribe about this choice to go with paragraphs instead of field groups. Vulgar. But yes, we use them. We do.
Do you have
Prolifically.
anything that you're willing to show around alternating paragraphs or nested paragraphs or any complex layouts?
Oh.
Anything you've done to make it better,
This
or
is probably
you
it.
just take a lot of Advil?
So you saw a screenshot. Let me just allow you to hear the cacophony for a second. Here we go. So this is a paragraph. This is one inside of a draggable table row. But maybe you want two in there. Okay. Just keep going. You can tell it's you can tell you're in paragraphs land because the damn label that tells you what you're clicking on goes away once you click on it. So now you just know that you're making list item. Before you knew you were adding a link. Now you just kind of have to guess. Like, well, there's a URL, there's link text, that must be what I'm doing. I don't know why the module thinks.
Same boat that we're in. Any ideas?
About how to fix that? Hook into the module and make it not make the label disappear. It's a ticket that we have right now in the queue. Yeah.
Can I back up a little bit with you?
With me?
Question revolves around all of you.
Okay.
The question revolves around what you looked at and how you sort of got your inspiration or ideas of what to do. So, for example, I'm not an expert in this area, but WordPress for content creation, the reputation is it's a lot easier to use.
Yes.
Drupal is hard.
Yeah.
Did you do anything sort of relative to looking at various other content applications to sort of borrow ideas or decrease the gap between Drupal and, let's say, WordPress for ease of use? Or
I don't know if so much specifically in this case, in the sense that it's the same field of study where you're trying to deliver something that makes sense to your customers. So I'm not sure to what extent, Colin might be able to speak to that a little bit, but I definitely feel like this is something that WordPress gets right. They're really empathetically putting themselves in the mindset of their authors, of who are their customers of their product, and they're developing an interface for them that makes sense.
Which is your goal, really.
What's
your own?
Well, I think that Drupal as a community has a long way to go. I mean, even if you look at the current efforts where a tremendous amount of work is going into the help system for Drupal, even surveying that scene where there is a lot of opinion and a lot of ideas and a lot of work already being done, from the outside looking in, it still looks and feels like something where developers are making it easier for them to add help to the system. It's so that's they're just improving the mechanisms by which they add help.
So-
No, it's not really. It doesn't really feel about like our customers are going to be using this. How do they want help, and what help do they want? Right? If you go to the help page now on Drupal, it's this table of help about modules, and that's not what customers need. They don't need help with modules.
So last track on this part. Imagine, okay, so let's say that the gap is Everest, Mount Everest in size. How far up Everest were you able to get? Any idea?
Well, I think the stuff that we've shown is probably 25% of the way.
Every iteration gets us closer.
Okay, well,
And only once or twice my project manager said, can we make this more WordPressy?
And I think a lot of what this talk is about is how Drupal is so not ready for that it's incredibly hard. If you have this idea like we're going to make this a beautiful product to use, you've got a big uphill battle in front of you right now. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Sort of wrapped into that question. This wasn't cheap, I imagine. Did you guys have to sell this? Have the client pressure to them to know that they needed it? Did they build the main site and say, oh shit, no one knows how to use the site, there's 35 content types?
I think the big thing that makes this possible is there is an incredible alignment across the whole team and the stakeholders on feedback, getting feedback and acting on feedback and having a close relationship with the customers. And Colin kicked it off by calling out some of that very early feedback that everybody knew going into this, that they originally had a system which was so unintuitive and painful to use that you needed a web expert to add the content.
Did you guys do the main site, or you just came in and redid the back end?
We've been the site was launched by the time that we came in to help.
So they launched it and said, we need to do the other side of the coin now.
Yeah, you can prioritize. Yeah.
There was a very primitive form of this starting to like, it was like maybe a seedling at that point, and most of what was already there kind of got cleared out or updated.
Yeah, I think on launch though was the default Drupal admin, right?
I'm just, maybe
Perfect.
12 years of the last 12 years doing projects with WordPress and Drupal, I've never had a client say, "Oh, we have a budget for you to do that."
They never have it.
Yeah.
No, they never have it. Yeah, and so it's never there, and I think it's something that we're going to have to keep improving on as a community, because the back end of these Drupal sites doesn't make sense to our customers.
Yeah, I hate delivering projects and the clients are like, and then some of the person that you trained left.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then this tour thing, and this is awesome.
Yeah.
I think the situation is that like nobody ever thought about it that way. Like, if it's like mom-and-pop.inc, you kind of give them some training, they struggle through.
A higher ed site, and the marketing person leaves. And
Right. Get a government site or like a major university, and now we've got a different situation. That admin site is a product for sure.
So with Tor and with help text, you can actually write good help content and insert it in your product contextually, and that basically, from a DevOps mindset, streamlines and automates future onboarding, which is critical for when people leave. And then new people are left with the site and they figure it out on their own, and they don't know that if they fill in this field over here that this content shows up automatically, so now they're entering it into the WYSIWYG instead. Other things are breaking, and all they know is that they use WordPress at home, and it works great. And when someone asks them, like, "What do you think about this Drupal site?" they're gonna say it sucks. And
Well, they don't know how to use it, but they don't know where to get help to know how to use it.
right,
Or they read something on Drupal 7. and then-
Right. I don't know how much time we have, but I think we're done.
Yeah.
Well, with that, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
So you guys did